just less likely. It's like wearing a condom. It's not going to prevent you from getting a disease, but the chance of wearing a condom, you're getting a disease goes dramatically down. And third, and probably the most important reason, it's a prophylactic for the rest of the goddamn population. Okay?
Enough said. I can't. Stevie, this says, check out Article 29, doctor arrested for selling DNA for 1.1 billion. Oh, I got to check that out and see what's going on there. Moving on. Nancy Pelosi visits Taiwan. China is pissed. Real quick, Squid, tell us why China is pissed. It has to do with...
I'm sorry, it's a game. China has been violating the whole South China Sea and Taiwan thing for decades. Remember, we've talked about this on the show. The China policy, the United States policy, and most of the world's policy that gave the People's Republic of China the United Nations seat and the recognition as the country of China when it used to be Taiwan, was based on two things. Number one, that there would be one China, and that would be the People's Republic of China. But number two, that the future of Taiwan would be negotiated peacefully by agreement between Taiwan and the People's Republic of China. This is the part that China seems to be forgetting as they get very aggressive militarily, as they threaten Taiwan, as they seem to be making plans to invade Taiwan and take them by force. That violates the entire agreement that's been around for 50 years since Richard Nixon, as far as China policy. So if they want to get upset that Speaker Pelosi and a congressional delegate, it wasn't just her, it was a whole congressional delegation, that they stopped in Taiwan for a day, too damn bad, because they're the ones who are violating this, and they're doing so not only by their aggression towards Taiwan, but by the fake islands that they're building to try to claim the entire South China Sea to the exclusion of the rest of the world. So China can pound sand. They're the villain here, not the United States or any of our elected officials. The other thing I will say is, for 50 years, we have had congressional delegations, cabinet level visits. This is nothing new. U.S. officials have been visiting Taiwan for 50 years. So if they want to all of a sudden get upset because Speaker Pelosi and I don't remember the list, but some Democrats and Republicans in the House visited Taiwan, then go ahead and get upset about it. But, look in your own house first, China.
Anything to add to that, Ken?
No, other than to say this, all I can say to China is grow the freak up and stop acting like a 2-year-old when your toy got taken away. Okay?
Oh, I thought we were going to get the classic world's smallest violin from Ken when he was talking about China.
Got that too. Here you go.
I was waiting for that because that's classic Ken. Also, look, people, a lot of people here say that I this and that, and I do. I call people out when I call people out. This week, the United States, Joe Biden ordered a strike against a terrorist, Al Qaeda, Amin al-Zawahiri. Look, for me, I've always paid attention to these strikes when they happen and who they happen to. And I've always pointed this out, and it's not just with Joe Biden, but I've always felt that sometimes these strikes against certain people are done at a time when people are lagging in the popularity polls. And I hate it because right now it's no secret Joe Biden is being dragged through the popularity polls. They're low. But yet we bring this into the mix to try to bring that up. It's not just with Joe Biden, people. This has happened with Trump. This has happened with Obama. This has happened with almost every president you go down the line as to what happens. For me, it sucks, and I don't want to say that I feel like they're connected, but I absolutely sometimes feel that these drone strikes and things that are carried out against people who are wanted, I feel like sometimes they're done to bring the popularity polls back up. And you guys can rip me apart for thinking that, but sometimes that's how I feel. And there's a story out there too that Trump could have had this guy during his term, but he rather had went for him, Bin Laden's son Hazma. He'd rather go for him because he was the sexy name. He was the celebrity name. He didn't want to go after this guy because he felt that nobody would know who he was. We all knew who he was, so he should have went after him. But I don't even really trust that story as being true. But I just really want to talk to you guys about that, because when we go back over the years and we look at the timing of these drone strikes or people being taken out, it's always at a time where people are lagging in the polls, and it drives me up a effing wall. I'm going to go with R squared. You're a military guy.
Yeah, I absolutely disagree with what you said. The timing is when you get intelligence to act, you act, and that's what they did. This thing, it takes a few weeks of developing the intelligence and the plan to attack, and that's what they do. And I don't fault any president or anybody else for when they do this, because if there was any effort to play politics with these things, that would leak out, and it just doesn't. Al Zawahiri was an evil actor on the stage for over 40 years. He was part of Islamic Jihad. He was part of the group that assassinated Anwar Sadat of Egypt. He was part of
bloody murder.
He was part of that was a tragedy for the world. He was part of some of the earlier, Middle East terrorism. He was part of the 1990s attacks on our embassies. He was part of the first attack on the World Trade Center. He then merged forces with Al Qaeda and was the mastermind of 9/11. He's the one that told bin Laden to go after the United States. So this guy was more important than bin Laden himself. There was no more important target than Al Zawahiri. There just wasn't. And so I don't care who the president was at the time. I don't care of the timing about it. If you could take out Zawahiri, that's what the war on terrorism is. If we don't take him out, there is no point of it. Now, there'll be issues about, he was hiding in Afghanistan, and what does that mean? And what about our relations with the Taliban? That can all be looked at through a political lens. That's fine. We can debate that, and all those different things. But the opportunity to take out one of the most evil people on this planet, Al Zawahiri, you say go. And I appreciate the fact that the president said, look, we've been in trouble lately because of collateral damage. He told the military and the intelligence, you figure out how to do it without collateral damage. And by God, they did it. There was not a single casualty other than Zawahiri himself. He was standing on the balcony of an apartment building and nobody else got hurt, not a scratch. That's brilliant. My hat off to the Department of Defense and the CIA and all the intelligence forces that worked on that. And that's my answer.
And there's actually a story out there talking about how precise and how precision this strike was. And they said this right here is a game changer as to how we progress in the future with handling these targets, these human targets. They're saying that this was an absolute game changer. People forget, during Trump, we had this drone strike where we had collateral damage because people were around that car. But this was contained, one person, nobody else was struck or hurt or injured. And the military is saying that this is one of the best. This is going to change the future. Ken, anything to add to that?
Yeah, very simply. If you're going to play politics, you don't knock this guy off in August. You knock him off in October, when it's going to be remembered. There is nobody who is paying attention to politics in August. Everyone's on vacation. There are no primaries. Networks are in reruns. All the talking heads are out doing their speaking tours now. So no disrespect, Sinister One. Love you to death. You blew this call. This wasn't about politics.
I pay a lot of attention to politics, and that's why I said, I know you guys were going to rip me apart because a lot of people don't care. They don't pay attention to politics like we do. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people aren't going to ask those questions like we do. So I already expected.
No, it's good that you asked the question. It's always good to ask questions, but maybe you were taking one for the team. Team Booth, way to go. You put it out there. You got my respect for that.
Well, sometimes, me, sometimes I do have a little bit of that government conspiracy theorist. I'm a big fan of 24.
But we're going to have,
I'm a big fan of Tom Clancy.
Using NFL analogy, we're sitting up to the booth and the replay referee is overruling you.
You know me, my dad made me read Tom Clancy books when I was younger. My dad made me read all that stuff. Mac Bolan. My dad made me read Mac Bolan
Oh
books back
God,
in the day
Matt
from Don
Boland. Now,
Pendleton.
now you're taking it back. War on the Mafia. Good God.
So I was actually sent home from school because I was in possession of a Mac Bolan book. I was reading Mac Bolan books in school,
At
and
least
I
you're
was sent home
reading.
because that was violent. Those books were considered violent
Well, they
for
are
kids to be
violent, but
reading.
so what?
But that was back then. Back then, that was a no. I mean, my dad took me to see every James Bond movie that was out there, and he got looked at. And now I understand why my dad got looked at, taking me to see James Bond movies back when I was a kid, because James Bond movies back then were risque. They, it was simulated sex, and it was violence. So we'll see. Let's move on. Trump, I already mentioned this. Trump had a chance. I don't believe this story. I don't think it's there. I don't think it has any bite. But let's get into this Ukraine invasion before I get you guys out of here. It's 8:10. Ukraine invasion. The real big news out of there is that they finally agreed on this grain export. I'm going to let Rob talk about it because Rob actually talked about this last month about this whole status of the grain export and why it was important. The grain export's first ship set sail this week, but at the same time, Russian missiles struck the grain tycoon's home, and he was killed this week, just days before that left. I'm going to let R-Square kind of get into this, why this was important that this deal needed to be done, and why did the grain have to leave the Ukraine and Russia? Why was this such a big deal? Why was this major news?
Yeah, it's a big deal for world hunger. I mean, there are a lot of countries in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, that rely on Ukraine for food sources, especially grain. And so there was a lot of, you can imagine the consequences if we look what we're experiencing here with our own supply and demand issues and, supply chain shortages and challenges. Imagine if you couldn't get food. It's bad enough, people are complaining because they can't get other things. Imagine if you couldn't get food. So, Russia was forced into this by the United Nations and some local actors like Turkey that were negotiating this. And the deal was that Ukrainian food exports would be allowed to go to places like Lebanon, where the first ship was going, and to Africa and other places that rely on their grain. They have to stop in Turkey. Turkey is going to inspect them to make sure that it's nothing, no contraband, no smuggling, and then the ships will be allowed to go. So this is not being done because Russia is a good person. There's no altruism here. Russia is the evil actor in all of this, but they were forced into this based on geopolitics. And so, they're reluctantly going to agree to this. Let's see how long. I mean, when the minute this agreement went in, the first thing they did was bomb the first, grain shipment. So, we'll see what happens, how long they allow this to go. But, this is a good thing for the world. This is really not about Russia, and it's not really about Ukraine. This is about world food supply. And so that's why the United Nations and other countries were able to, kind of broker this agreement. We'll see how long it lasts, and we'll see if it has an impact on the, on the battle, the ensuing battle.
Ken, anything to add?
Not really. Rob, again, was absolutely correct. It's very important to understand why, in addition for feeding these people, which is incredibly important, it's also important to Ukraine's economy to keep going. Russia was trying basically to not only bomb Ukraine out of existence, basically destroy their economy, so they had no other choice but to accept the benevolence of Mother Russia. And remember, it's very important to remember that Ukraine's always been referred to as the breadbasket of Russia and the USSR and of other nations, because their grain exports are huge.
So we're going to get ready to get into the second hour of the show, but I'm going to let my guys say goodbye here. We went a little bit over, but that's okay because we had to get this stuff talked about. So I'm going to let Ken go first. Tell them where they can see you and watch you, man.
First of all, I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers, all 12 of you. Be safe. I'll be back next month with R² right here on the booth. And for those of you who unfortunately have to work outside during this incredibly hot temperatures, please remain hydrated. We want you back in September. See you then.
Squared,
Yeah,
what do you got going on?
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay informed. See you in a few weeks.
Thank you for telling us about that article. Thank you, Mr. Paul Forrest put it in the chat, so I want to take care of that. Make sure we say thanks to Paul with the Norman Lear. and good stuff. You guys will be on next month, first
Yep.
Monday.
First Tuesday of the month.
Yep, which will be after Labor Day, because Labor Day is early this year, if I'm not
International
mistaken.
Day of the Worker.
So what we're gonna do
Viva
is
la
I'm gonna take a quick break here, and then we're gonna be back with my next guest, Ryan Carpenter, who's waiting in the waiting room. We're gonna be back with more Booth after this. Here we go. All right, we're back here in the booth. Sinister One here. I got to thank my guys. First Tuesdays, Ken Diesel, R Squared. We broke it down, and we've got a special second hour here for you guys tonight. Right now, I got my man Ryan Carpenter is on with me right now. Ryan, say hello to everybody, man.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? How we doing?
And I got Ryan on because I want to talk about this major change in the pro wrestling world. This is a huge change, and I don't think people realize it. Blue Meanie came out, and Blue Meanie said, whether you like Vince McMahon or whether you hate Vince McMahon, you can't deny what Vince McMahon did for the industry as a whole. When you talk about professional wrestling. Now, for those who know, Vince has had his legal problems. I'm not here to bash his legal issues or his legal problems. He'll have to answer to all that stuff in a court of law. One of the one things that I'm going to say that's my opinion of this matter, and I'm going to let Ryan introduce himself and let us know what's been going on, is I feel that Vince McMahon's downfall came because of a certain show called Dark Side of the Ring. And I feel that for 3 years, this show was on Vince McMahon's ass. And I also think there were 3 episodes that led to the demise of things behind the scene for Vince McMahon and the WWE. I think the Fabulous Moolah episode hurt him bad because we already knew the black eye that was for the WWE with Moolah. I also feel that the episode about Chris Benoit hurt him, and then lastly, this was the one that really hurt, and the rumblings continued until this whole thing, and it was also one of the reasons why I think this show went off the air was because they were getting threatened. But the terror at 50,000 feet, where they went overseas, and Vince McMahon was painted in a bad light. I also think this episode was the reason why Ric Flair did this match. This last final match was to get himself back into good graces and good light, because the stuff that came out of that story was chasing Ric Flair's ass around outside of the wrestling world. So I feel that these 3 stories, and I feel that Dark Side of the Ring played a big part into women starting to come forward and speak about Vince McMahon and being paid off. But again, I'm going to let Ryan Carpenter introduce himself. You guys have seen him around a lot of the wrestling circuits and boxing circuits. Ryan, let him know who you are.
My name is Ryan Carpenter, and for the last few years, I have been a professional ring announcer. I'm a second generation one at that, following in my father's footsteps, who was lucky enough to do stuff on ESPN, Fox Sports, et cetera, et cetera. I just kind of was one of those things I decided that I wanted to do because I am so passionate about pro wrestling. It's one of those things that 20 years ago everybody was watching, and it's one of those parts of geek culture almost. And but I have always been out there with my heart, my sleeve, as far as pro wrestling goes. We live in a city of boxing. I love boxing as well, but pro wrestling is my first love, and it always has been. Um, I mean, where to even begin with all this? Because it changes so much. The landscape of the WWE is going to change uh, pretty gradually, but at the same time, I think we're already starting to see changes.
Well,
Uh,
before we get into the
Raw.
changes, let's I want to
Okay.
give the time. I want to give the time to speak on
Talk
Vince
about
McMahon
Vince.
first, because let's be
Sure.
honest here. What Blue Meanie said, without Vince McMahon, wrestling would not be where it is today. People tend to forget that in the 80s, when Vince McMahon
Okay.
brought the whole rock and roll era and Friday night fights to Friday night with WWE, people forget that the Canadian and Southern promoters, they put a bounty on Vince's head because they didn't want wrestlers to make money. They wanted to keep
Right.
control of wrestlers and make all that money for themselves and pay wrestlers pennies on the dollar. Vince said, "Hey, I've got TV contracts. I've got this MTV deal." He stole Hogan away. He stole all of these names away that you saw that he built the WWE into in the 80s, because he stole
Right.
these guys away and paid them and showed them the promised land. There was a bounty on his head. The promoters wanted to kill Vince McMahon.
No,
Vince McMahon,
wrestling. Yeah, absolutely. No, wrestling was a territorial sport, so we'll call it that. Nowadays, people call it sports entertainment. Personally, I call it wrestling because that's what it is. And he was really the guy that brought it to the forefront, and there's no denying that. So for whatever people's opinion is on whatever happened, you cannot deny this guy that he is basically the godfather of wrestling as we know it today. Uh, as far as what happened, there's still so much to come out that it's really hard to have a strong, super strong opinion on it. Um, I, I'll tell you this much: I don't think he stepped down because nothing happened. Uh, Something obviously happened. How bad that was, I think we'll find out over the coming months. And it's just been a real roller coaster. It was just 8 months ago or 6 months ago that Triple H, who was his son-in-law, was completely out of the picture.
yeah,
Completely out of the
almost
picture.
died.
Had a heart attack, almost died. Had a heart attack, and it really seemed like he might just be done doing this. And the idea of that alone was kind of crazy, but it seemed very real. And it's funny how things work out. I think we're on the precipice, and some people will say this might be a little bit crazy, but I think in the next 2 to 5 years, we could see um, a huge, let me put it this way. Once about every 20 years, wrestling explodes into the mainstream. I think it's going to do that again in the next 2 to 5 years. And the reason that I feel that way, you had the 80s. The 80s was very big. Everybody was watching it. Then you had the Attitude Era, where they had the highest ratings of all time. Now there's an actual competitor out there. There's an actual competitor. we can debate how big of a competitor they are, but they are a competitor. They are
Yeah.
a legit competitor on a national syndicated cable network, which has not been done in literally 20 years. So I think we could see something huge happen over the next 2 to 5 years. I think it could easily come back into the mainstream. But more so than that, something that really caught my eye is that literally a half an hour ago, WWE released a video on their YouTube, and it was called the SummerSlam Tryout. I have never seen anything like this. I have never, if there have done something like this, it wasn't done publicly. It wasn't put out there. And you should watch the video, and you should watch it closely, because there's certain people that are standing out in the crowd, and it's Triple H at the head of it, and he is running the show, and he has people. Oddly enough, people like Big E was actually one of the people that was there, and he had a bad neck injury, as we all know. We don't know what his status is going to be, and he was actually given some great tips to these guys that were trying to become the next superstars. You also noticed Paul Heyman was one of the people featured in the video. I think this is going to be another person that's going to be of great importance over the next year or so in WWE. I know that his relationship with Stephanie is pretty good. It's pretty strong. Um, I think what I want people to understand, one of the reasons why this is such a big deal, is that for the last 20 to 30 years, WWE TV has been produced by literally the same person. And you
It's
could
been a
make the
holding
argument. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And that gentleman's name is Kevin Dunn, and he has been the executive producer of WWE TV probably for as long as you've been watching it. Nobody is a producer of any television program for 30 years. It just doesn't happen. So to see some of these new faces come out in the fold is going to be extremely interesting. Uh, Again, Matt Bloom, I noticed in that video. Matt Bloom, Paul Heyman. And now, along with Kevin Dunn, you have people like Bruce Pritchard, who was Vince's right-hand man for many years, came back into the fold, was now the head of creative. And basically the head of creative is like, they're basically Vince. That's basically Vince's, what his job's always been. He's always been the last guy on the very top guy of the totem pole. And you had to ride everything through him. We now have Triple H as the head of creative, which is insane. We now have two CEOs of the company, which is going to be Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan. And I have to say that I have never seen the rise of one person in the history of wrestling than Nick Khan in the last 2 years. Somebody that you had completely never heard of and has risen to the very top of the company. And the reason for that is because he's made WWE a lot of money. The Peacock deal, he made that happen. That was worth over $1 billion. That was only for the U.S. rights. That's it. Hey, they're still doing WWE Network worldwide right now, except in the U.S. The television deals, which expire this year, they're expecting him to get even more money than he got last time. I believe Fox paid somewhere in the sum of hundreds of millions of dollars just for the right to have SmackDown. During COVID. And I think part of that, I think what helped them was that there was no original programming at that time.
That's right.
And the WWE was one of the few people that carried on, and you can have your opinions about that, but they definitely saw huge benefits.
Ryan, I'm not gonna lie. I was on SmackDown and Raw 3 times during COVID through the virtual, and I had a fun ass time. So anybody who thinks that they didn't change the industry, look, that was sheer genius to send everybody a link to join and be part of that virtual audience and get the instructions in your ear from the producers. And I told people, somebody said, well, what was it like? I said, you have to do it. You have to experience it. It is the most weirdest thing. And I'm so glad I was able to do it during COVID. But I also got to mention, there's a couple of things here that I don't think people realize that right away happened once Vince McMahon stepped down. The first thing that came out was the announcement of that second hour, that second segment of Raw dumping the PG-13 status. That was number one huge, because it meant that we were going to see a lot of different storyline things in that second, half of Raw now. Back to how it was in the Attitude Era, like you spoke of. The other thing we saw AEW's Tony Khan. He welcomed this. He applauded this because he felt that he could work better with Stephanie and Triple H. He felt that they understand him. And I think that's what works here, because he knows you need competitors. Look, we all know that the Raw WCW Nitro battle, we will never get anything like that ever in our lifetime. That was the best in wrestling television, when you had guys whose contracts ended after a pay-per-view on Sunday, like Rick Rude, and then he shows up on WCW Nitro.
What a difference a day can make.
It was insane television. You couldn't even wrap your head around how crazy that was.
Yeah.
It was just insane.
I tried to explain it to my 14-year-old nephew, and it's just, I'm like, can you imagine if like AEW and WWE were on at the same exact time, but AEW was even more popular than it was? I mean, it's hard to explain to even the younger generation.
And trash talking each other on live TV. And when the Attitude Era kicked off into Generation X, they had a Raw in Atlanta, Georgia, and they took a tank to WCW headquarters for Monday Nitro, which was just, again, insane. The closest thing we've gotten to that right now is Cody Rhodes leaving AEW and showing up at WrestleMania. That's probably the closest we've got of something of that caliber right now.
For WWE and AEW. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's probably the closest we've got right now. The key here is Vince is gone. And we've already seen major changes. Right out the gate, SmackDown, we felt Stephanie McMahon's presence with SmackDown. A lot of people applauded the SmackDown. But guess what? Was it a fluke? Everybody said. We have SummerSlam coming up. For me, I watched SummerSlam. I got home late. I turned on and enjoyed the second part of SummerSlam. And here in the picture, you guys see Brock Lesnar taking a standing ovation. I'm going to just tell you right now, if what we saw at SummerSlam is what Stephanie McMahon and Triple H have prepared for us, I think the WWE, I don't think there's anything to worry about. Your thoughts? After what you've seen so far.
From what I've seen so far, I will tell you that main event, it brought me back to being 14 years old and watching Monday Night Raw and just watching these insane things happen. And with Lesnar coming out with the big rig and pulling up the ring, like, it was just insane. It reminded me of Austin on the Zamboni type of thing. Just like that crash TV where you don't know what's going to happen. And that's just in a week. And you have to understand that card was pretty much already laid out. So these are all last second changes. So some of what we saw was already kind of in place. And then some of it was them trying to, the word out there was that they weren't very happy with the card that creative had had up until that point, and they wanted to try to make it as fun as they possibly could. And there's an iconic picture. You can see that after they go off the air at SummerSlam, it's Brock Lesnar just kind of chilling in the corner of the ring with his cowboy hat on, and the thing is lifted up 15 feet in the air. I mean, it's just it's one of those things that, again, is very reminiscent of. I hate to keep going back to it, but the Attitude Era, and like you said, it's now going to be TV 14. You got to look at it this way. They've spent the last 10 to 15 years getting all these kids to enjoy WWE, right? Well, those kids are now turning into teenagers. So what entertained them 10 years ago does not necessarily entertain them right now. So I think very much just like they did in 1996 or 1997, when Vince came out and did his famous promo. I think it is a very smart move on their part. I think that the product itself has been dying for a change like that. And I just I don't think we're necessarily going to get Attitude Era, but we're going to get something different. And that's good. That's something that's it's going to broaden the horizons of the things that they're going to do on the show, because they've kind of been restrained to a certain point. There's only so much you can do on TVPG. And it's funny, that whole TVPG thing started because Linda wanted to get into politics, and it just kind of took off from there.
Right.
And I kind of felt that WWE kind of lost itself along the way. Don't get me wrong, I have my favorites like my Daniel Bryan's, and there are some tremendous matches they have put on over the years. But creatively, I think it's been missing that piece, that little extra piece of entertainment, or the thing that kind of makes it more like a soap opera. There's not as much backstage stuff being done. There's not as much what you would call skits being done. It's very paint by the numbers, and it has been that way for a while now. And I'm very excited to see what Triple H will do now that he can paint outside the numbers pretty much and have a little bit of free reign. Because my understanding is that Nick Khan will basically just be doing the business stuff. He's going to continue doing the money stuff, getting the deals. He's not going to be sticking his nose in to the creative stuff. Stephanie is going to be the one that's going to be the CEO that's going to be involved with creative. So you got the power couple of Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, which has kind of been a pipe dream for hardcore wrestling fans for a while now. We've seen what Triple H can do in NXT. Those takeovers.
Yep. I was just about to mention that.
Absolutely. Those takeovers for that 3 to 4 year period is some of the best wrestling between the ropes that you could get anywhere. It was bar none, in my opinion, especially before AEW. It was in a league of its own. I found myself watching NXT more than I did the two big brands. And I think that says something. I think Triple H was onto something. And this Monday Night Raw, look who comes out, and he's going to be going for the U.S. title. Tommaso Ciampa, who was nowhere to be seen for months. And now all of a sudden he's number one contender for the U.S. title. If that doesn't scream Triple H, I don't know what does. Clearly his thumb is on the top of this thing. Right. And we're going to see some, again, I know it's not going to be overnight, but it's going to be gradual, and you're going to see changes, and it's going to be exciting. I'm just hearing about some of the changes out back. There is no longer like a CEO room, Vince's office. that has been a staple of WWE in the back,
Right.
out back. That is they tore those signs down in the Nissan Center of this past event. That was nowhere to be found. There's no chairs outside the office you have to sit in. Triple H is walking out and about and talking to people. I've heard stories like Chris Jericho has shared of where like he would wait like an hour and a half just to talk to Vince about an idea. That's not Triple H's style. He's going to be out there and hopefully getting some input from. I mean, I see wrestlers just as much as they are athletes, they're artists.
Right.
And I think it's very tough when you're trying to be a artist and you're being told, well, this is what you have to say. This is the exact words that you have to use. Some of the best promos we've ever watched of guys talking in the ring, they had bullet points and that was it. And they just spoke from the heart, turned it up to 11. And actually, that's the number one thing I hope we pull out of all this, is that Triple H lets these guys turn themselves up to 11. And we start to see some real stars come out. Because the stars, yeah.
Steve Reeder says he wants to be a WWE referee. He's Steve Reeder, who's done UFC matches. He's in the chat. He says he wants to be a WWE referee. Here's a point that you were just making that I wanted to touch base on, going back to letting guys be themselves. In the last 3 days, Michael Cole is all over social media because he's been using the so-called banned words that Vince didn't want anybody. Michael Cole has been making the most of it by saying what he wants to say now. So it's great to see that. I'm really excited to see where we go with Brock Lesnar, who, even though he lost his match with Roman Reigns at SummerSlam, Brock Lesnar's shot into superstardom is amazing to me, because this is a guy who was booed out of a SummerSlam in a main event against Goldberg years ago. Literally booed out of the building, because I felt that he was one-dimensional. Brock Lesnar's whole gimmick got tired. It got overused. Seeing Brock Lesnar have a personality now, shaking hands with kids, seeing Brock Lesnar cut a sick-ass promo and be able to speak what he did at SummerSlam when he took that mic and did his own introduction, and then the fact that he has this personality is just like, oh my God, this is a Brock Lesnar that could really take over the WWE for a long effing time with what we've seen here. He lost the match, but was the big guy. At the end of the day, he was the trending guy at the end of SummerSlam, was Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was one of those deals where the winner didn't matter as much. It mattered whose image came out on top. And again, you see Lesnar, just like I was talking about, he's being himself. He lives in Saskatchewan, Canada. He lives on a farm. He is a farm boy. That is what he is. I invite people to check out the Stone Cold podcast with him and Brock Lesnar. You see a whole different side to Brock Lesnar that you're like, who is this man? Because I've never seen him on my TV before. And again, I remember watching that interview and saying, man, he's not nearly as bad as they say he is. I mean, he's actually a pretty charismatic guy when you let him be himself. And again, that goes back to the scripts. Every script being handed over, and you got to say this word for word, verbatim. And if you don't, Vince is going to give you the nasty eye when you come back through those curtains. I think that alone changing opens up in all kinds of avenues. You talk about Brock Lesnar. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. They've also spoken to, just in the short amount of time that Triple H has been in power, Conor McGregor they have been in talks with.
Mm-hmm.
Tyson Fury, they have been in talks with, which Tyson
Mm-hmm.
did do one match, I believe, at one of their events in Saudi Arabia at one point. I think I want to
Yes, he
say it was
did.
against Braun Strowman.
Yes, it was. Yep.
But they're talking to people that are meter changers. They're gonna push the meter up. You're gonna tell me that if they didn't sign Conor McGregor, that it wouldn't be the number one story on Sports Center for a day?
Oh yeah.
I,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And let's be honest here. As much as I hate the Paul brothers, when I saw Logan Paul at WrestleMania, I'm like, Vince is gonna tap into this, and he didn't. But the first thing Triple H and Stephanie did, they signed him to a contract, and Logan Paul kicked ass at SummerSlam with one hell of a crazy frog splash from the turnbuckle. And I've said this, I'm like, as much as you hate a guy like Logan Paul,
no,
he
yeah,
fits.
yeah.
He fits in the WWE. He brings the swagger. You can either hate him or you're gonna love him. And right now, I'm surprised the fans are loving him. I'm curious to see how long the Logan Paul train lasts in the WWE, because I'm a big fan of The Miz. Why am I a big fan of The Miz? Because The Miz came from the real world, from MTV.
Yeah.
The Miz was on the real world. He was this guy aspiring to be a wrestler. People were laughing at him and picking on him and saying he was never going to make it. And look at The Miz is one of the biggest superstars for the longest time in the WWE, and he came from MTV's real world. And I love him.
He literally walked around the house with a toy WWE title and being dead serious, being like, I'm going to be WWE champion one day. And credit to him, he has become that. And he is one of the most, the way I would describe him is every time these quote unquote budget cuts happen, The Miz is not worried about his phone ring, because he is one of the most reliable superstars that they have. When's the last time he was hurt? Never. He's never been hurt. And that has to do with his style, I think, a little bit too. But there's something to be said, man. I'm in agreement with you as far as with Logan Paul. Bad Bunny was incredible for like a first time thing. I was very impressed with Bad Bunny. I would rate him up there with Bad Bunny as like one of the best debuts for somebody that's from the outside of the realm of wrestling. He did, a lot of people don't know this, but Logan Paul did amateur wrestling in high school. He does gymnastics. And let's be quite honest, all these Paul brother things, they're entertainment. Like all the fights they've done and all that kind of stuff. It is as close as you get to sports entertainment as you possibly can get. So this isn't as new to them as everybody necessarily thinks.
Right.
They have, I mean, they think about like, and I believe it was his brother that fought Mayweather, correct?
Yes, Jake. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that was just as much of a pony show than anything. To me at least, that's how I felt about it after watching it.
They know how to make money. And that's one thing that's for sure. But I think Stephanie and Triple H jumping on him right away, I think that just showed where they're taking this. And you hit the nail on the head when you said the NXT thing, because that's what I was headed to. Triple H had so much success with NXT. Like right now, you got Nikita Lyons down there making a ton of noise down in NXT. I'm just sitting here waiting for her to show up on Raw or SmackDown. I can't wait till that moment comes, because they're putting a lot behind her right now. And she's yet to make that move up. But Tomas, when you talked about him coming out on Raw this week, it was like, Jesus, we had been waiting for this for the last 5 years for this guy to make this transition up. And, Vince wasn't feeling him. Vince wasn't feeling this guy for whatever reason. Triple H and them come in and they bring him right up, and these are the things that I'm like, man, we really need to watch what's going on here. This is historic what we're seeing.
It's interesting you bring that up because I think one of the other big changes that we're going to see is we're going to get further away from what I like to call the Vince McMahon prototype, and that's somebody that's over 6'6", possibly 250 to 350. That he sees guys like that, and he is just like, that's my guy. That's the guy that's going to bring us to the promised land. And in some cases that might be true, but not always. And certainly there have been wrestlers that are well under those heights and weights that have been bigger stars than anybody. I would say one of the most over acts they've had in the last 10 years was Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30. I mean, he's 5'8", 5'9". He's not. It was a great story they told, and guess who was involved in that story? Triple H. I mean, come on, there's a pattern here between NXT and the stuff that like Triple H has been involved in over the years has been some of the best stuff that I have seen from WWE as a company. And I've been more of an AEW guy over the last 2 to 3 years, because I have been given I grew up as a WWE guy. I just have felt that their show overall has been lackluster. It hasn't been as good as I think it can be. And now with Triple H there, I think there's hope. I really do. I think there's hope for it. And I think that Triple H is smart enough, and Stephanie as well, obviously. You kind of touched on it a little bit. Is they need? I'm gonna kind of compare it to WrestleMania 14. What was like for me the tipping point was Mike Tyson. When Mike Tyson was brought into the world of the WWE, they were playing clips of that on the news, on Sports Center, and that was like one of the best bought WrestleManias in like years.
Here in Boston. And it was here in Boston.
Right here in Boston. Yeah, absolutely, baby. I was at the DX workout. I was just a kid, but I was at the DX workout where they did it at Faneuil Hall. And they came out and they had some matches. And then they did the whole thing where Stone Cold showed up, and it was a blast.
Patriots jersey. You had a Patriots jersey on.
What? How'd you know that? That's insane. I really did. That's crazy. Yeah, no, it was. Again, it's very. I'm being reminded of things of past, and there's so many lapsed fans. Here's the ultimate question in wrestling has always been: with the numbers they used to get during the Monday Night Wars, when WCW went out of business, where the heck did all those people go that used to watch wrestling?
Right.
Where are they? So I believe that there are many people out there that will watch if something piques their interest. And that's what they need. They need something to grab them to bring them back into the fold. And again, they pull off a guy like McGregor, Fury, or any one of those guys, any type of person like that.
Right.
And you're going to see a huge uptick. Who knows, man? They could be signing TikTokers by this time next week. They're going to do whatever they have to do to try to be relevant. And I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Anything that's going to bring more eyes to the product, I'm all for. So, I don't understand the TikTok stuff as much. I'm starting to learn more and more about it. But I would not shock me if like some huge TikToker got signed a month from now. They are going to think outside of the box, and that is a positive thing for wrestling fans and for like I like to call them lapsed fans, those friends of yours that used to watch Monday Night Raw with you, and now couldn't be bothered to watch it if you paid them to watch it. They're not interested in it anymore. They've
We,
moved on. A lot of them to UFC. They've lost some people to that, but there's. I think that there is some really good things that could be coming up the pipe right now. It's just a world without Vince McMahon. I literally thought that Vince McMahon was going to die in in that chair in the back room. I really did. I was convinced of it. Like that's how he's got to go out. He's a
yeah,
workaholic.
like I said, I felt the heat from Dark Side of the Ring was nipping at his heels, and then all of a sudden these other things came out, and I feel like it's karma because let's be honest, I feel like Vince McMahon is who forced Dark Side of the Ring off the air. They're very vocal about not talking about what happened. They're claiming they've got some movie deal and this and that, bigger and better things. I think there's a lot more behind it, but we got 5 minutes left, and I'd be an a-hole if we didn't just close out the last 5 minutes with what was one of the biggest matches this past weekend. Was the Ric Flair's last match. It was a tag team match involving with him and Jeff Jarrett, of course. The fact is that this man at 75, 77 years old performed in this match. He did some high-risk maneuvers. There was an incident there where they said you could tell he decided to not, and I think they were looking to do the trademark over the turnbuckle move that he usually does. And I think he got a second guess. And were you able to watch it? Because I wasn't able to watch it. I actually just read the whole replay.
Yes, I did get a chance to watch it. And I thought that for what it was entertaining. It was.
He juiced.
Listen, he's 70 something. Yeah, he juiced at 70 something years old. I mean, what more can you ask for? It was funny because when we were going back and forth about who his opponent's going to be, my suggestion was Jay Lethal. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I said,
yes, you did.
I think Jay would be a great. I think Jay would be a great guy, and I think Jay showed that in the ring because he was perfect with Flair. He really knew how to make it, and you got to give credit to all three of those other guys. They did it the right way too. I think a tag team match was the way to go. It's the safer way to go. Typically in wrestling, like if you ever go to even like a local wrestling show, if it's in many cases, they'll do tag team matches with legends. That's just the way it goes. Like it's a smart idea. You get the big build up, you get the big name person to come running in that ring and do their thing and do their couple of spots and get that crowd going. And I gotta say, Ric Flair went way beyond that. Your typical Legends tag team match. He put it all out there, man. And I was worried for him, man, a little bit with the whole. I mean, he literally has what is it called, a heart. He's something for his heart on him. Which if it was disconnected, there could be serious issues there. So that worried me a little bit. But they were ready. They had the way they had him dressed. The tights were especially made for him that way. So that way his medical device wouldn't be toyed with too much. Right. But if you want, I mean, the story itself got really crazy. It was fun TV online for a few weeks. They made a fun little story out of it, and I mean, do you think it's really his last match? That's what I'm left with almost. Like, he could do it again. I could see him doing it again. and the way Flair is, he's not doing it for the money. He misses the jubilee. I'm forgetting who I'm quoting here, but it was a particular wrestler that came out and said, Rick's not there for the money. Rick misses the crowd. He misses the jubilation. He misses the admiration. That's what he truly misses.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he did this, and I think it was also just to prove that he could do it at that age. And more power to him, man. The fact that he did it. I think if you're a wrestling fan, you should watch it. It's worth a watch. If for nothing else, for curiosity reasons, you should watch it. If you've ever wondered what it looks like for somebody over 70 to take part in a sporting event of that magnitude, it's unbelievable. And right at ringside, it was incredible. They had Undertaker, Mick Foley, and Bret Hart ready to congratulate him at the end of the match. And I was like, this is something really special here. That they put together something really special. You really have to hand it to. They're saying JCP, Crocker Promotions, but my hat goes off to Conrad Thompson and his team. I know they had a lot to do with that. He's actually his son-in-law now. He's married to one of his daughters. And they did StarCast 5 that whole weekend, which is typically an event they do at AEW shows, where all of the legends are there and you get to meet them. And from the videos that I saw of StarCast, that was an amazing thing in itself as well.
Right.
So I was very happy with what I saw in Ric Flair's last match. He exceeded my expectations, but he's one of the greatest of all time. It's
he was.
to him.
He's one of the best.
It's like riding a bike. It's like riding a bike. He gets between those ropes, and everything is just. It's all muscle memory. He just knows how to do it. So I would strongly suggest to people out there, give it a watch, check it out. Knowing Rick and the way he is, I'm not as convinced it might be his last match. But I know that was the whole selling point of the show. But it's wrestling, man. It wouldn't be the first time somebody said it was their last match and it wasn't their last match.
Right. Exactly. So all right, we're at 9:00. I want to thank everybody for tuning into the show tonight. Everybody who supports the show with the beanies, the shows I broadcast and produce over here. She Talks Football Podcast, Drafting the Circuits, Oscar Mike Radio. Talk Back with Gloria Shea returns this weekend with Veana Marie. Maddie C Sports for You and Me is on right now, and followed by Happy Hour with Lito. They're on also tonight, YouTube, so you want to make sure to check them out. And also make sure to check out the Brockton Farmers Market. It happens every Friday from 10 to 2 p.m. There are a ton of vendors there. Your SNAP EBT card is also accepted here at the Brockton's Farmers Market, which is right just outside the City Hall. They also accept WIC. But the big thing here, people, is that transportation is provided for those who reside in Brockton Housing Authority property. So if you reside in the Brockton Housing Authority property, you call Dial-A-Bat. Dial-A-Bat will get you over free of charge to the Brockton Farmers Market on Saturday, so you can buy on Friday, so you can get your stuff and then bring you back. So that is a huge, huge plus. This is put on by the Good Samaritan Medical Center. Also, culinary arts training is going down at Southeastern Regional Technical Institute. Please reach out to them because I believe it's filling up fast. It might already be filled. I might have to pull the ad if it's already full. 508-230-1297 is what you want to look at. www.southeasterntechinstitute.edu is where you can go and look it up, but it's a good skill to learn. Also, Veana Marie's promo tour is still rolling along for this album release on the 13th You take a look at the dates that we've got here coming up in August. The big one you all need to remember is August 13th, the listening party, and we will be at Prova live on the 18th, performing live at Brockton's
Nice.
Prova. And I hope to see you guys down there. And before we get out of here, Ryan, you got your podcast coming. Tell people real quick how they're going to be able to find you in the next few months coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, if you go on to Facebook, you can actually just look up Newsline with Ryan Carpenter. But there's going to be an announcement on there in about the next day or so at this point, of a whole new name for the actual thing. And it's expected to start Labor Day weekend. And it's gonna be a lot of fun, man. We're gonna do a lot of different things on the show. Um, some Brockton politics. I feel like there's not enough of that. I think you do a great job with the politics stuff on your show.
I wish we had. To be honest,
but-
I'm just going to keep it. I'm going to keep it real with you. So for me, I feel like we can have more people come on the booth, but I'm not going to lie. There's some people out here who don't want to come on the booth because I think they know I'm going to ask some questions. I applaud Gary Keith. Gary Keith was running for a seat. Gary Keith came on this show, and I come right out and I asked Gary Keith about his legal issues. And you know what? He respected me for asking me. He said, "Keith, I knew you was going to come at me with this question because that's how you are, you know." And you know, and if you're gonna avoid the show because you know I'm not gonna pull any punches and ask you what needs to be asked, hey, that's on you, you know. But the booth is an open door for every politician who's running, who wants to be on. You can come on here. I'm not gonna come on here and sugarcoat your ass either.
No, you're not gonna throw softballs. Sorry, dude.
Yeah.
No,
I'm gonna ask the questions that people want to know.
If you want to buy ads, buy ads. I'm not your free ad. I'm here to talk. Let's talk, real questions. And that's what I think. Yeah, that's one of the things I seek to do with my show. It's going to be a little bit of a variety. We're gonna delve into some other stuff as well in the news. Some wrestling stuff obviously comes naturally to me, and also entertainment stuff as well. When you hear the new name of the podcast, it will make sense. It's kind of like a double entendre type thing where it will make sense. But there's just and Keith, me and you go back to the WXPR days. And
office chair
God
races.
bless that. Yeah, office chair races. Office chair races. There's a joke that literally nobody's gonna get right now. So Kevin Tachi does an amazing job up at ATV. But I would love to see more shows. It used to be you had a show on every day or night that was talking about this kind of stuff. And now we have to look forward to it, maybe once a week or whatever it is. So I'm really looking forward to getting back out there and asking the real questions. I've been involved in politics. I've been involved in campaigns. I know what really goes on in these things. And just like yourself, Keith, I'm not going to pull back. I'm going to ask the hardball questions. It's plain and simple. And I think the people of Brockton and the surrounding area deserve that. I really do. I don't think there's enough of it out there. There's just a few of us, and that's it. And it's like we need more. I'm not necessarily dissing the enterprise, but it's not what it once was. I'm sorry. It's not. I remember coming down from XPR, and if you could remember what that newsroom was like, it was like a whole world in there,
Well, I think
it's just,
once they dropped the Brockton name from the Enterprise, that was the downfall. Once they dropped that Brockton name, it was no longer Brockton's paper.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you there.
And
So, you know,
I'm not gonna
no, go
lie.
ahead.
I actually went to the editor of the Brockton Enterprise when back with podcasting nobody knew about in 2000, and I actually tried to get podcasting for Brockton Enterprise, and I was laughed at. And the person told me nobody's ever going to listen to radio and newspaper stuff on a podcast. And then 4 years later, the Boston Herald got an award in innovation for podcasting on their newspaper, because remember when the Boston Herald had all their writers had podcasts, and they won a huge award nationwide, and I was so pissed because Brockton could have had that award 4 years prior if I was listened to. So I have a big thing, and I could call that person out and tell people who it was, but I'm not gonna go there. It doesn't change anything. The fact is that the Brockton Enterprise could have had that award 4 years before the Boston Globe had it.
They could have, and they would be running. And look at them; they're dying to stay afloat online. Imagine if they had a whole bunch of podcast shows on there. It wouldn't even subscription numbers would go through the roof.
Yeah,
plain and
because
simple.
we had Kevin Tachi, we had XBR on the internet before any other network around here. And we were an AM network, and we were only allowed 500 listeners at the time, because that was the max for listeners for a radio show at that time, was 500. If you hit 500, you crashed the network. So it's crazy stuff. So, man, I can't wait to see and hear your stuff, man. So keep me updated. Let me know when it's going to happen. And you plan on doing your shows live from Joe Angelo's every episode? Is that how you're going to do?
Yeah, so we've talked, and I think like at least 2 out of 4 every month we're going to do live from there. Possibly all of them, but at least 2 out of 4 of them. I think it has an awesome setup. Have you ever been in Mulligan's and you look at the window that looks out on Main Street?
Well,
it's just like a perfect spot.
You were with me when I was doing my early podcasting at Westgate Lanes. We were doing them from Westgate Lounge. And the problem is that was early technology. We had people coming up during the podcast and interrupting the show while we were trying to do interviews. I remember you came down and helped out a couple of times. But that was we were way ahead of everybody. We were way ahead of everybody doing shows over the internet. So crazy stuff, man. Hey, I want to thank you for coming on the show, man.
Hey, yeah, no, and there will be a big announcement, and we'll be talking about it personally over the next week or so. And who knows? I don't want to give anything away, but some fun stuff is around the corner. So I've enjoyed talking to you on here. At Ryan A. Carp on Twitter. Check me out on there. And again, you can go to my page on Facebook. It's Newsline with Ryan Carp. Just put in Ryan Carpenter, Newsline with Ryan Carpenter, and I'll be announcing the new name of the podcast by the end of this week with the new logo and all that. So definitely check it out. And it's always great to hook back up with you, Keith. The listeners probably don't even realize, but me and you go back to XDR. God, man, that was 15 years ago. Easy.
Yeah, insane. Insane.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so we're going to get ready to get out of here. It's 9:12. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. SpongeBob, if you can, do me a favor. Take us home.
Well, see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to The Booth on Hoobazoo and HatcherRadio.com. Please follow the Facebook page and subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. The Booth is a Sinister One production hosted by Sinister One.
I've got to start hanging out with friends that are a little more intelligent and understand politics and stuff. It's just that I'm up on this level up here, and all my friends are down here. Me, nah. You guys, nah. Maybe a little more down in here. Screw you guys, I'm going home.
I smoke, I drink, I do my thing. These bitches hating, so you know I got to make it plain. Don't do cocaine with your chick, my main. We stick together, true forever, yeah, you know we bang. I miss those days, which was easy. If only I I make it. Keep this shit on repeat. Now that I done upgraded, I've been upstate and y'all think I'm playing. And I got a hit now for these weak ass hoes who think I ain't slaying. Try me, and I'll probably end up laughing cause I never back down. I'm that chick with a clean ass whip. I don't need that shit, it's like I'm my own now. I get home and I get tired of fussing, fighting, guess I gotta crack down. Don't mess with me cause on everything I'ma have to bring the whole city out.
WHOOBAZOO, that's whoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.